Okay, we're at the top of the hour. I see that Janos is back in, but he is going to reboot to deal with his audio problems. That said, I'm going to get started with the meeting intro. Let's see if it shares. I hope everyone is seeing the intro slide now. It should be projected. Thank you all for joining our DETNET Working Group interim. I'm Lou Berger. Janos Farkas, as I mentioned, is having some audio issues and will be rejoining. He had to reboot his computer, but we're going to get started. We also have David Black, our technical advisor, and we might end up with our secretary, although it is quite early on the west coast of the US. This isn't a formal IETF meeting. It is obviously virtual, but the note well still applies. I think all are familiar with this. It goes to how we conduct ourselves and how we cover our the contributions to the IETF. And if you're not familiar with it, please go take a look. Please keep your audio off unless you are asked to speak or you are the one speaking. It says headsets recommended. I think today it works pretty well without it. We're using Meet Echo. Obviously, you're here with us, so thank you for joining. Note taking you can get to through the there's a button in the upper right about the note taking. If you can join the Hedge Doc and help us capture the discussion, that would be great. The recording of this meeting will also be available after the session. You joining here also serves as a virtual blue sheet, so no action is required there. Today, we're going to be, after the intro, we're going to get an update on the requirements draft. This is our working group document on scaling requirements, really headed towards an enhanced DETNET data plane. We had talked about having a design team. Some process things got in the way of the formal design team, so we've decided that we are going to proceed with a series of open working meetings. Those meetings are going to be chaired by our tech advisor, David Black. So David, thank you so much. The focus of this meeting is on the process related to how we're going to progressing and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to talk and to hear what the planned process is. We're going to not get into too much discussion of solutions here. Yes, we're going to get an update on the requirements, but the focus of the meeting is really going to be on the plan that David is going to put forward, and this has been prepared together with the working group chairs. So that's where we're going to spend the bulk of the time. The open discussion is to focus on this process and making sure that those who wish to contribute to the data plane enhancements have an opportunity to participate in the proposed working meetings. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Peng. Go ahead, Torlis.
Yeah, so I was suggesting an additional item on the agenda yesterday. Sorry that I was so late, and that was the discussed and promised type of method that could help this process with respect to criteria assessment for the different mechanisms. So if we have time for that, maybe that would be useful to get started having participants look at it in this meeting.
Okay, well, thanks for that. As you mentioned, it came in quite late. We had others who wished to speak, and we had said that those people will go to that first open meeting and talk about it there, as well as talk about it on the list. It wouldn't be fair to have your material come in so late and have those others not be able to speak in front of you. So, those people, as well as you, are welcome to come to the mic, but we're not going to do those slides. Appreciate the material. Please discuss it on the list and bring it to the first open meeting. So thanks for that contribution, Troilus. That's great.
By the way, I haven't seen actually anybody else make a request on the mailing list. So I think it would be great if those other requests and the according drafts would be communicated openly on the mailing list, as opposed to just requested to chairs, because then it's very opaque to understand what's going on with other people in the working group.
They're welcome to contribute in the way they see fit. Usually we ask to not clutter the working group with all session requests. We did the same just now for the upcoming IETF. It's pretty typical not to have the session requests come on the whole list and add clutter there. I certainly agree that I would like them to contribute on the list publicly in the open meetings, bring documents forward. So public discussion is what we're all about. So from the process side, them submitting a request, a slot request, typically, as I said, that goes on in the often just among the chairs. Now with that, we're going to move on to the requirements document. Pang. I'm going to try to pass you control. So you should have control of the slides. If you don't, please let me know and I'll figure out how to manage from my end. Pang, can you do an audio check, please? I think you're muted. I don't see you speaking, so I suspect that you're having audio issues. Peng Liu? So it seems to be a morning of audio issues. Peng is going to restart. Janos, did your audio come back? Just doing an audio check with you. Okay, Peng, I see you back in. Are you able to speak?
Hello?
Ah, yes.
Well,
We hear you.
so sorry.
Wonderful.
Sorry.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I will go quickly. So, yeah, this is Peng from Chanwa. So for this draft requirement for scaling deterministic network, it was updated to 0.1 version to address the comments during the adoption call and recently. So mainly for from David, Balas, Kiran, and Doof, and also thanks for all of them. So first, as the name was changed from large scale to scaling, we also changed the words in the whole document, but we don't give a definition of scaling DETNET. Different from the previous name of large scale, the authors don't think the definition of it is needed. So as an abstract, there was a change from long hops per hop time variation to large variation in latency among hops as David's suggestion. So this presentation will introduce the comments from previous version and change of current version. I hope you can review the emails in the mailing list to know well about them, since there was a lot of update for the name structure, titles of some sections, and the text. So here's a summary of major comments and changes. Most of them happened in section 3 and leads to some restructuring. We added the explicit requirement regarding flow fluctuation caused by large number of flows. Correspondingly, add a bullet 5 in key attributes related to the new requirement. So to make the relation clear, for each key attribute, we add the specific section reference, which could be presented later. And for section 3.1.4, we change the title to provide mechanisms not requiring synchronization from support synchronization-based methods, so that it looks more compatible for the 4 subsections. And for section 3.4 and 3.7, move the different level of DETnet service demand to section 3.7 and add some explanations for them. And for section 3.4, it is now about the aggregation, which is in section 3.5 in the older version, and also add some words reference to the existing RFC. And the last for the section 4.3 and 4.4, there is no one-to-one reference between the bullets in introduction and the subsections in section 3. And the relationship might be end-to-end here. The text can be expected to be moved to show the relationship that is also the main issues we haven't addressed. So the minor comments and changes, I won't really go through all of them. So I think if you have any description issues of the current version, please feel free to see, and hope you can see the mailing list. So the next are the key attributes in section 2, introduction, and technical requirements in section 3, and data plan enhancement and requirements in section 4. So first are the key attributes in introduction. Some of them are changed in red, including splitting and remerge, but not so much change about the directions. Here it is that there's relaxed clock synchronization or no clock synchronization in different domains. And the end-to-end path is combination of low and high latency hops. There are various transmission rates supported at different ports on the different network nodes, and there are large number of flows, which may be difficult to be identified per flow state. And the flow fluctuation caused by a large number of flows may happen frequently. And the topology change and failures of link might be more common. Last one is that mechanisms used to ensure bounded latency may be multiple or have different configuration of parameters in multi-domains with different level demands of DETnet service. The technical requirements is closely aligned with HK attributes. It is now that tolerate time asynchrony, and next is support large single hop propagation latency, accommodates the higher link speed, and be scalable to massive traffic flows while moving the different level of DETnet service demand to requirement 7. And requirement 5 is prevent flow fluctuation from disturbing service. And next is tolerate the failures of links or nodes and topology changes. And the last one is support enhancement of queuing mechanisms. So this is the whole picture. And for this slide, to make it clear, here's a one-to-one mapping of key attributes and technical requirements. And again, I want to introduce them again, and hope you can check it within your sites. If there's will be the discussion, maybe not. Okay, this slide could be a good abstract and foundation. And well, so David, do you? Okay, I will go on. So here's the section 4. It has 4 requirements of data plan enhancement, which are not closely aligned with each technical requirement. For requirement 1 is support aggregated flow identification. It could be aligned with requirement Oh, sorry, it is requirement 5, not requirement 4 in the new version. Sorry. And the second one supports meta information used by functions ensuring deterministic latency. It could be aligned with requirement 7. And for the last two requirements, both of them saying there's a MPS data plan solution, but there's no IPv6 data plan solution. So those section is more enhancement if we want to map each of them to section 3. And we haven't addressed this issue, but with, some of the authors think one possible way is to add a new requirement in section 3, such as enhancement of supporting native IPv6. Some network may not support MPLS. When applying data service, native IPv6 could be considered. And so as to the SRv6, yeah. So there's also some space for us to refine this document. So we hope that we can get more useful comments and refine it together. Well, that's all. Thank you.
What is your plan for addressing the list discussion?
Yes, we think to maybe enhance the requirement 3, not sorry, section 3, to give a mapping. But we don't really have the text, so we are not sure if we can. And finally, as a final, if we can't provide useful text, maybe we will remove the last two requirements in section 4.
Okay, thank you. So really appreciate the comments with David and working with him on that, but there were a few other smaller comments. It would be good just to go back on the list and make sure those are addressed as well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Let me see if I can. I seem to have lost the slide controls to switch to the next person. Janos, I don't know if you can move to the next person, to David's slides. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, David, if you can rejoin, you should be good to go. I'm going to pass you control as well. Thank you.
Okay. Are people able to hear me? It looks like it's coming through.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me see if I can figure out how to do the slide control from here. So this is a initial discussion of how to go about figuring out what we're going to do to enhance the data plane. Okay, where is?
David, it should show along the bottom.
Should show along the bottom somewhere. Ah, there it is. Carefully hidden behind the note that says it's your slides. Okay, got it. Ha, it works. Thank you. So all of this is proposed. So I'm gonna run through the slides and then it's gonna be open discussion. I mean, I think the agenda said 30 and 10. I think it's gonna be much closer to 10 and 30. So I'd like to go through all the slides and then we can quickly hop around as people have comments, suggestions, whatnot. Okay, so the proposed initial focus is queuing, as was said in the announcement, plans for informal open working meetings on progressing the topic of an enhanced DETNET data plane. It'll be the same scope as the recently disbanded design team. There are the two open working meeting goals that were announced. And there's been some question, other topics are going to be outside the scope of these working meetings. They may still be within the scope of the working group as a whole. This is a focused effort to go deal with queuing. It's not going to, it's not intended to do everything that could be done or should be done to enhance DETNet. Okay, tentative approach. So first of all, I want to thank Peng and the authors for working on the scaling requirements draft, as that's looking like a very useful way to structure this. There are business technical updates to scaling requirements. There will be more to come. The authors have very helpfully put each requirement in its own draft section. And I think as we go along, we need to remove requirements that aren't for scaling. That affects requirements 4.3 and 4.4. I think the working group sort of gets to decide whether those are closely related to scaling or ought to be pursued independently. So with a refined set of requirements, the next step is to determine which proposed solution is satisfy which requirements. This is something like a two-dimensional matrix of solutions on one axis, requirements on the other axis. And here the section numbers help a lot because it means we could just put the section numbers in the matrix as labels, and people can go look at the scaling requirements draft that explains what each of them means in much more detail. Then the fun starts. Need to do a priority triage of requirements, figuring out among all the things that are in the requirements draft, how do they stack up against the importance of actually satisfying them. In a perfect world, we'd find easy to satisfy all of them. The world's not perfect. Reality has a habit of intruding. Now, A, B, and C in this slide are shown as in order, but in practice, they're going to be pursued concurrently because there will be feedback. There will be feedback among them. If we discover, for example, that there's a particular requirement that all the solutions are having difficulty satisfying, maybe that requirement's not been stated well and needs to be refined. Somehow, out of all of this, the hope is to converge on a set of solutions to progress that satisfy at least the most important requirements, perhaps not all of them, perhaps not comprehensively, and somehow obtain working group rough consensus for all of this. I think this is the point at which the working group chairs expect that I have a black hat, a magic wand. I'm going to produce a rabbit. We'll see how well that works. Okay, a little bit more on priority triage. I mentioned this on the previous slide, that the purple text is what's on the previous slide. In essence, want to sort the requirements into sort of three categories. Must requirements, if we don't satisfy the requirement, we're wasting our time. Should requirements, really does mean what should is. Strongly recommend that we figure out how to satisfy it, as there would be significant drawbacks to scalable DETNet if not satisfied. And may requirements, it says in quotes, nice to have. There are some benefits, no significant drawbacks if requirement is moved. And if we discover requirements don't even make it to nice to have, that's a strong suggestion that perhaps the requirement ought to be removed from the requirements draft. This set of must, should, may applies to the entire set of queuing solutions to be progressed. There may well be more than one. If there's more than one that's selected for progression, different requirements could be satisfied by different solutions. It's not necessary that a single solution meet all of the requirements, although that would be nice and simple. Okay, 2 more slides. All right. The disbanded design team did in fact get something useful done. We figured out what we're up against in scheduling meeting times, and it's not great. So there are 5 important time zones for participants are listed here, and there is no good meeting time across all 5 of these time zones. So since I'm in Eastern time, Eastern time zone, I put the meeting times in Eastern time. I'm hoping people can quickly convert their own time zone. The proposal is to alternate meetings between slots that are 12 hours off. Alternate between 8 and 10 in the evening Eastern time and 8 and 10 in the morning Eastern time. What happens here is that the 8 to 10 in the evening is bad for Europe. 8 to 10 in the morning is bad for the Pacific time zone, U.S. West Coast. Part of this is that some of the time slots like this one are not great for Asia, and based on interest, we have a large set of folks from Asia who want to participate. I don't want to go. It somehow doesn't feel right to force all the meetings into the evening in Asia. All working group open meetings will be recorded, so when a meeting lands in a bad time zone, you'll be able to review the recording. Proposed frequency is every 2 weeks starting after the Yokohama IETF meetings, and there are the time slots for the proposed first 2 meetings. April 11th, the evening slot Eastern time, and April 26th, the morning slot Eastern time. What will happen on April 11th is for a lot of people that will be sometime on April 12th. So these meetings are in fact about 2 weeks apart. Last slide. We have an adventure ahead of us. Welcome questions, welcome comments, welcome even dead cats and rotten tomatoes. And an Asian colleague and a friend of mine reminds me that I need to explain my American cultural references. This is a reference to the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a well-known book by Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain. Okay, open for questions and comments.
Before opening the queue, could you go back one slide?
Yes.
So I put in the chat that we would like to get closure on timing before talking about any other topic. We think it's really, really important that as many people who want to contribute to this effort are able, and that the meeting times can work for the collective group. So we'd like to get feedback on this proposal. If it's good for you, feel free to say in chat it works for you. If you have something that you would like to say about moving the time, we would really appreciate you coming to the mic and talking about that. So with that, back to you, David, to manage the queue.
All right. I see Turles in queue. Turles, go ahead on logistics and timing, please.
Right. So I think when you were looking for time slots, you were asking the back then officially suggested members of the design team. So maybe it would be good to simply check for the others that want to participate. So in my case, I certainly want to put my chips on this time slot, right? 5 a.m. in the morning is a lot easier these days for me than in the evening. And just, you know, if the others that want to participate who weren't asked can chime in equally, maybe you can update the total that you have. Otherwise, I'll obviously make any slot.
Yeah, and it's this is an attempt to spread spread the inconvenience. As it says, there's no good meeting time across all 5 time zones.
That's actually the one thing that I'm glad you're trying to do, although I not remember that we've ever successfully managed to make people happy with altering times. If there is an example, that would be good to know. I mean, as I said, right, I'm open for anything. My preference is this time slot.
Yizhu, go ahead.
Proposed meeting time, but I do have a small concern regarding the alternate, because I think it's not so common that we alternate every 2 weeks, and given that the time looks at it is it's just 8 to 10 p.m. and 8 to 10 a.m. The change is there is only a very slight change. People may get confused if they check the website. And another thing is, I haven't checked, but if there is, for example, a holiday happened on, I think that's Tuesday, then we still need to make some notification in advance to say whether we just bypass that, for example, the first time slot, or we just postpone it but still using the first time slot, something like that. So my comment is it looks like the alternating the time slot is a little bit hard for executing, but I'm okay with both the time slots actually. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on logistics?
So,
So
my
perhaps,
take on it is that there's people don't love the alternating, but can live with it, and it does sort of spread the pain. And we sort of have that principle in the IETF. So I'm not hearing any objection to this proposal. I do hear don't love it, but I'm not hearing can't live without it. I can't live with it. So I'm hearing everyone can live with this alternating schedule. I see Torlis. Come on back, Torlis.
Go for it for a month or 4 meetings, and then ask the question again, right? So very simple.
yeah,
Sure.
I think that would make some sense. Let's try this and let's try this and see see how well it works. I mean, and Torres, it turns out my preference is actually for the 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. time slot. I'm no good at 8 a.m. without a serious dose of coffee. So
The series dose of sorry, go ahead.
coffee. Shusang?
Hi, I'm just wondering, I'm okay with the time proposal. I just wondering, will we have a kind of side meeting in Japan? Because I think most of the people who care about this question will be there, and it will be great if we can sit together face to face and just maybe just 1 hour is okay. We can discuss about the schedule or anything else besides the call meeting that will start after the IETF 116. This is just a proposal.
David, do you want to say anything on that? I have a thought on there, but
I'm going to defer to you. I mean, my only comment on that is that I will not be in Yokohama. So, but I'm willing to call in if we can get it scheduled for something other than wee hours of the morning.
Okay, that's fair. I would actually like to suggest that we have an informal side meeting for those that are there who are interested in the topic, and to take advantage of the high bandwidth channel and make it completely informal and self-organizing, and not run by anyone with a hat. So we don't need the tech advisor or the chairs to organize, but just to self-organize, meet, talk about it, talk through the different topics, and then bring back whatever the discussion was onto the list. The face-to-face is great for high volume exchanges, and I think we should take advantage of it. So Shusang, thank you so much for that. And if you felt like putting in a request for a side meeting related to DETNET, and if you need any support from the chairs or the AD, I'm sure that would be forthcoming. Since I mentioned Shusang, I'm going to give her a chance to go first. Torlis, if you don't mind her jumping the queue, and then you. Go ahead, Shusang.
Try to organize side meeting, and it is a little pity that we will without David in Japan, but maybe we can send out a link for the remote participations. And also we will, if there is a side meeting, as Liu has mentioned, we can summarize the process and discuss it in the main list. Yeah, I will do this.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Shisong. And I want to reinforce what Lou said about going to list. One of the reasons that I proposed a meeting every other week as opposed to every week is to encourage work to be done between the meetings and encourage work to be visible on the mailing list. That's ultimately where progress is made and decisions are made.
Yes, I agree. That is really important. We will do that.
Yeah, really great suggestions. Appreciate it, Shisong.
Cool.
Carlos?
Thank you.
That was when we take it to the list, let's particularly ask the folks for feedback from folks who will not be in Yokohama, like David or so, at which points in time they would be able to join remotely to that side discussion, and then we can set it up accordingly, get a room and so on. So thanks, Shisong, for taking the lead, and I'll be happy to chime in and support the logistics.
Okay, I think we, Shisong, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I just say thanks, Torlis.
Okay. I think we've covered logistics, and now, David, if you don't mind, should we cover the scope proposal and see if there's comments on the scope?
Sure. So this is the scope slide, I think. We can talk about scope, or I can flip over to one of the process slides.
However you want to run it.
However people, wherever I'll go wherever people come to the mic would like me to go. Turles, go ahead.
Monopolize the microphone, so please everybody stand up here. So I think as an author on the scaling requirements draft, right, and having memorized your must, shoulds, and everything, I guess the way I see it is that we should be concerned about how what we write in the requirements draft as a working group would be mapped to the design team, right? So in terms of what is out of scope, what is in scope, and then what is in scope, the must, should, and may would be more important to get right than, I guess, for the ones that are out of scope, where we wouldn't address them immediately through this effort, but through other TBD efforts in the working group. And I guess what I'm missing for that mapping is a little bit, I think, the type of goals we think we can address with queuing, right? So in terms of, if I look at the requirements draft, it's talking about latency, jitter, and a bunch of other things. And so maybe there would be a way to say, okay, here is the type of functionality that we think we can address through the queuing, and that is jitter, that is latency, and that's where I think also our requirements draft is mostly operator focused, which is the necessary starting point, right? But it may not expose all the vendor relevant properties to compare. And I think that's where I'm struggling a little bit. I don't have all the answer. I just wanted to raise the point that some of those things we may want to compare things on are related to hardware feasibility. I think the clocking is one good example that we do cover. But yeah, if you have any, especially as the tech advisor, have any more abilities to constraints the things you think we should and could achieve with the queuing, that would be great to have as added input into the process. Dave.
Let's see. I have so two reactions to that. I think the first is that as we fill out the matrix in item B, I think which requirements are better addressed by queuing versus not particularly well addressed by queuing will emerge. And I'm hoping to see that as that goes along and the scaling requirements draft gets refined, that we sort of focus in on what makes sense. This is not easy to do, but the alternative of dictating the scope in advance and being inflexible about it doesn't feel like a good thing to do. And it's not really the way the IETF usually operates. Janos?
I like what is on the slide, the approach that refining the requirements first and then investigating queuing aspect, because we should not just do queuing for the beauty of the queuing, but to address the requirements. So I like the approach. Thank you.
Shusong.
I agree with Janos. I think this is a very efficient method to try to evaluate method of queuing mechanisms with the requirements listed in the requirement document. And I also agree that queuing is the core of solve the scaling problem and introducing the bounding latency. But my concern is that there seems no discussion point about the encapsulation, because I know the core is the queuing mechanisms, because we rely on the queuing mechanisms to provide bounding latency features. But from the perspective of the communication and interoperation between different devices and the implementations, the encapsulation may be another very important topic for this work. So I just want to ask, will this also be considered during our discussion, or it will be left after the queuing discussion?
I'm tempted to try to it sounds like a yes/no question. I'm tempted to try to answer it with a little bit of both. To the extent that the queuing mechanisms require additional information on the wire, I would think that they would influence an encapsulation discussion. But job one is to figure out the queuing mechanisms. I'm not sure I really answered your question. Perhaps Lou or Janos has a better answer.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with what you said, and I'll remind people of the original charter, which was very focused on not changing encapsulation, no new encapsulation, not changing the data plane. So that principle should still apply. But also, as David said, if queuing requires some additional information, that would inform a discussion on encapsulation changes.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable for me. I think maybe the conclusion is that that will be the, these two aspects will be considered together. For example, we discuss each kind of queuing mechanism, and at the same time, we will see whether these kind of mechanisms request new encapsulation, for example, in IP header or other kind of layer 3 headers. And so shall we make it another item that we evaluate each mechanism, whether it will request a new encapsulation or not? I don't know. It's just, we have to have a method to take it into the consideration when we discuss the queuing mechanisms, because I think the mechanisms will be really different, and there seems there seems some voice in our last IETF meeting that maybe people is requesting some some encapsulation that can cover all the kinds of queuing mechanisms, and may just pick the shortest, the simplest common part of different queuing mechanisms and make it the encapsulation change really small. Or yeah, I think my point is just that we should take it into consideration when we discuss the queuing mechanisms and evaluate them.
I think that's a fine consideration, understanding for each mechanism. What is the additional data that is required to be exchanged, if any? I think I recall at least one mechanism that was talking about not needing to exchange any additional data. So I think that's a fine evaluation consideration.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Yakov.
Yeah, hi everyone. When you're discussing the queuing, I think there's a scalability issue which hasn't been addressed. And sorry for not participating in this process and just dropping in here. But very important, the loading you're assuming on the lines and on the devices along the way. If you're assuming that the loading is close to zero, for instance, there's nothing else on the line at all, you have a path all to yourself, then the queuing doesn't really matter. Once your loading is getting high, then there's a big difference between the different queuing mechanisms, and I think that has to be addressed, because there are certain mechanisms like our TSN friends in the Ethernet world, where they block out everything else, and worst case, you can guarantee absolute bounds, but you reduce the capacity that you can actually use on the line by a large factor. And there are other mechanisms which don't have to drop that much capacity.
Okay, I mean, I would observe that if the traffic that is offered is always less than the outgoing bandwidth, the queues are always empty, and queuing is kind of pointless, which I think is an extreme version of the point you're making.
Yeah, extreme version. As I said before, there's an extreme version in QBV, where I simply say every time-sensitive flow gets its own window, and whether or not it's going to fill that window, or whether or not it's going to need that window in this time around in the scheduling gate, in the gate schedule, I reserve it. And while on the other hand, there are mechanisms like EDF and my proposal that was a draft a while ago, which don't have to reserve capacity. They're more like diff serve rather than in serve in IETF terminology. And I think that's a major difference. And I think it's a scalability issue, because scalability doesn't always just mean the number of devices in your network. It also means the amount of bandwidth you want to, or data rate you want to handle. And that's from the both analytical and simulation work that I've been doing with my academic hat. That's a critical issue for comparison.
I'm wondering if that merits discussion in the requirements draft.
My own personal feeling is that the requirements draft goes into a lot of detail on timing, which is not always that important, once again, depending on what your timing errors are. But if your bounds are in the tens of milliseconds and your timing errors are in the microseconds, then the whole discussion is moot. Obviously, if you're looking for timing bounds in the low microseconds and your errors are microseconds, then it's a major issue. On the other hand, loading is not discussed as much.
Yeah, I would suggest discussion on the list towards possibly landing text and requirements draft. Iju?
This is more about what's suggested by Xuesong. So I think probably we can add the second bullet to item C, because in the page 2 actually. Would you please?
Sure.
Yeah, switch to page 2. Yeah, one of the goals is the information and definition that will be common. So we need to identify whether there is common elements or not, or we would like them to be put in common such things. So it looks to me that it is worth to put a second bullet to item C in page 3 to show that for for each of the proposed queuing solution, what are the maybe the like the encapsulation or elements, so that we can evaluate whether there are commonality among different solutions. So that's just a suggestion to this tentative approach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Turles?
That's really a core point. And if you have any suggestions for the requirements document, please bring them up. Be happy to consider them, how to put them in. In my opinion, I think the problem is a little bit that something as fundamental as in the forwarding plane, data plane, to propose and put better mechanisms is a very long-term thing, and therefore a lot of the logistics around must, should, and may that are typically very well known upfront are with respect to things like the load of DetNet traffic very, very difficult to predict. But I can say from what I would feel similar experiences with the bringing multicast into networks, and also having the same discussion, right? How much multicast is in your network, right? Can't you simply use unicast replication, which to me would be the equivalent of use better diff-serve type mechanism to solve the problem, right? That always ended up with customers feeling very unsure about going down a particular path with respect to scaling, unless we could show that the solution we have can scale to much fuller load in the network. Did then operator networks require that full loading long term? Quite different answers to that, right? So I'd have a hard time guaranteeing that there is a must for 90% traffic being DetNet, but I can certainly tell you that there is a very big risk of customers not wanting to buy into a DetNet solution if it wouldn't be able to scale up to that percentage of traffic.
That may also be a useful discussion to reflect requirements draft. I mean, as it says in the slide, pursue all of these concurrently. I expect the requirements draft to evolve as we learn more about what the solutions are capable of and what the trade-offs are in this area. Yakov?
Another issue, which I don't know has been discussed. What is the objective? Are we going for an absolute bound which must be 100% conformed to, or do we allow some kind of play? That is, are we having a target for a bound for a packet to arrive at final destination, but let's say 1% of the time it might not meet it, and if that means that the application has to drop it, then it contributes what's effectively packet loss. Since there's going to be packet loss on the network anyway, I think that's something relevant. And once again, it changes, it extends the number of queuing mechanisms that you can look at.
I would definitely prefer to look at a broader set of queuing mechanisms from the outset, as opposed to imposing hard real-time requirements up front. There are certainly a set of applications that have hard real-time requirements, but that is not the entire set of applications that DetNet is aimed at.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, then you're saying that I wouldn't call it real time, but hard deadlines or absolute upper bounds are not the requirement. You could have something which statistically meets a bound, and that will allow a whole slew of other queuing mechanisms to be used.
Expressing a preference to look at a set of queuing mechanisms, and I'll observe if you go look at the use case draft, you'll find a number of applications in there that don't have really hard upper bounds. Okay, Turles, and then Balas.
I'm very much split here, right? So as far as selling something like a DETNET solution under the term deterministic, I'd have a hard time to not have the hard bound, because I think that's all the industry has been, I guess, thinking about how to interpret the term deterministic. And I think that's also how you would read all the architecture documents that we've written, and even more so when I even started, Yakov, to have the same discussion years ago when Norm Finn and other IEEE people were more present in DETNET. That was kind of their golden requirement. So I would, if we go down the road of software targets, then let's make sure that we don't sneak it in through this process, but make it more obvious, and ideally give it a somewhat different name, and not bounded latency, but come up with another term, so that we make clear that this is an extension of what I very much hope we'd agree was the original intent, which is hard bound. But yeah, I'm certainly happy to have this effort also look into that.
Okay. So a couple of comments. The first bullet under open working meeting goals is information definitions. And I think we're now exploring some interesting information and definitions. And the requirements draft already has some material in it on different levels of DETNET service that could accommodate this. Balas?
Yes, so I just wanted to reflect to Yakov's comment. So yes, hard bounds are definitely part of the story. So as you, David, also referred to the use case draft, maybe I would comment in that way that definitely starting the discussion with the requirements, that would help us a lot in order to understand better what these hard bounds means. And what I have learned in the last couple of years, discussing with owners of use cases and various industrial players, is that sometimes they are formulating somewhat differently the requirements as we are doing in the telco and in the IETF environment, for example. So industrial player can also say that I have control cycles, and there should be at least one of the control cycles of 2 consecutive control cycles error-free. And that is something differently defined as we usually have requirements in IETF. So just saying that 1% of the traffic may just not meet this hard bound, I think that will not be the case. So we need some discussion on the requirements. Thank you.
Agree. Lou, you want to jump in before?
I was going to give Yakov 1 minute and then end the meeting. So Yakov, I didn't mean to kick you out of queue. If you want to,
I saw the time and I took myself out of the queue.
Okay. Well, then I timed it wrong because I was leaving you 1 minute. Anyway, we're at the end of this meeting. Before we thank everyone for coming, David, do you have any final words?
I just want to thank everyone for participating. As the last slide says, we have an adventure ahead of us, and I think this is a start. This is a start. Thank you.
Well, thank you all who've come to contribute. It's clear that we're going to have some really good discussions at the upcoming meeting and then in these open meetings. it's really important to have as many people contribute to this as possible, so that we can gauge working group consensus and make sure that what's brought to the working group is matches the consensus of the group. And of course, thank you to our tech advisor, David Block, for his willingness to shepherd these discussions. And with that, we will see each other, those in person or virtually, in just a few weeks or just a couple of weeks. Thank you all, and see you soon.